All right, welcome to the CS Leadership Roundtable, your monthly forum for actionable insights across customer success, support, and service. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder and architect of the Success Coaching Training Program, and I am thrilled to be leading today's conversation on creating career development plans. This learning series is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've trained over 40,000 professionals across 96 countries. Whether you're focused on customer success, technical support, or frontline service, our programs are designed to help your team deliver exceptional customer experiences. You can find all the details of our offerings on our website, successcoaching.co, or in the chat where Ashley has provided some links and coupon codes of anything special that we are going to be offering. A few quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be available next week with a transcript. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for questions. Higher upvoted questions get priority, and please keep the chat for commentary only. So chat for commentary, questions in the Q&A window. LinkedIn Live viewers, you can post your questions directly in the comments, which will be relayed to us. Now, what sets our roundtable apart is our focus on real-world applications. We bring together industry experts who share practical insights on insights that you can implement regardless of your company size or customer engagement model. Today, I have three outstanding leaders joining me, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves to y'all and have them talk a bit about themselves before we get started. So let's begin with introductions in alphabetical order with Eric.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Douglas, Director of Customer Success at FinThrive. Based out here in North Dallas and Prosper, Texas. And no, I'm not a Dallas Cowboys fan, but I've been a customer success leader for about 18 years, leading teams at various organizations such as CVS Health, Optum, and now FinThrive, where we're focused on helping healthcare providers optimize revenue through technology and optimization. Right. So one of my favorite parts about leadership is helping CSMs identify strengths and build careers that align with both their personal goals and the company's mission. I'm really excited and looking forward to sharing and listening to the experiences and learning from each of you today. So let's go get it.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you not being a Dallas Cowboys fan. Next up is, as a Niners fan, it's important for me to throw that out there. Next up is Keishla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keishla Ceaser-Jones. I serve as a Managing Director of Partner Success at EAB, where I lead a national team that helps higher ed institutions drive measurable outcomes in their marketing and enrollment solutions. But my real focus is really about building teams. As a customer success leader, we have two customers. We have the customers that we serve with our products and services, but we have our internal teams that are our first customers. And when they're empowered and focused, we know that they're going to help us deliver results. So I'm really excited to have this conversation about how we keep a focus on the business, but also a focus on our employees to help drive retention in many ways in the work that we do. So thanks for having me.
I love that. I love that attitude. You know, one of my favorite leaders that I've been following for years is Sir Richard Branson. And Sir Richard Branson famously said years ago, your customers aren't number one. Your people are number one, because if you treat your people as number one, that's going to flow down to your customers. So love that attitude. Thanks, Keishla. And last but not least, Patrick.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. And hey, I'm Patrick James. I am in Northern California. Actually, we were talking about 20 minutes away from Andrew. And so I'm the CEO, founder, and I would say consultant of all things inside Inroad. What we do is we go out and work with managers to be more effective inside their organization. So we help managers around project management, project remediation, client remediation, turning around those projects and client relationships that have gone sideways. We've partnered with Success Coaching here. We have the Manager Essentials course that I've constructed, and I also teach here, part of the success coaching team. And so for the last 30 years, leading up to Inroad, I've worked throughout the entire customer journey for the last 30 years, being customer focused my entire career. So I'm very happy to be here and talk about this, because this is a deep passion of mine, working with managers, talking about promotions and career development.
Awesome. Thank you all again for making the time for us. All right. So today, we're diving into career development plans, a topic that's both critical and, if I'm being honest, one where I think we need to have a more frank conversation than most leaders are comfortable having. Here's what we know. Structured career development isn't optional anymore, and the data backs this up. 94% of employees say they'd stay longer if we invested in their development. That's not a soft metric. That's nearly universal. Our people are demanding clear growth plans, and without intentional development strategies, we lose talent, teams disengage, and customers' outcomes suffer. That's the business case, and it's real. But let's talk about what's also real. Most of us are building career frameworks in organizations where the math simply doesn't work. For example, we have 15 CSMs, maybe 2 senior positions above them, and we're having conversations about growth with all 15 people. We create development plans. We do the one-on-ones. We talk about aspirations, and then a customer escalation hits, a renewal goes sideways, and development gets pushed to next quarter again. So we find ourselves in this tension. And here's what makes this tension so frustrating. 83% of companies say developing leaders is important, but only 5% actually have programs in place. We're great at talking about development. We're terrible at doing it. We genuinely want to invest in our people. I believe that about everyone on this call, but we're also managing within real constraints. Limited senior roles, relentless customer demands, budget pressures, and business needs that often require our best people to stay exactly where they are, managing our most strategic accounts. The question isn't whether career development matters. It absolutely does. The question is whether we're being honest enough about what growth actually looks like, what's genuinely achievable within our organizations, and how we navigate the very real gap between what our people want and what we can realistically provide. So today, I want us to go beyond the playbook and talk about how we create development approaches that are both ambitious and honest, that invest in our people while acknowledging the real constraints we're all working within. Mm-hmm. So let's start here. How do you balance giving your team genuine hope and opportunity for growth while being realistic about the constraints, whether that's limited positions, budget, or business needs? Where's the line between being inspirational and being misleading? And I'm asking this because 74% of employees feel blocked by lack of opportunity, not by their own limitations, but by organizational constraints. So how do we address that honestly?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off, and thank you, Andrew, for the question. So I look at it first off as we in customer facing roles, customer success, we're about building trust, and we need to be truthful with our people. So first off, the best leaders don't pretend that the org chart is just limitless. There are constraints with anything that we do. But what we need to do is focus on how each person can discover that they can leverage their unique strengths in what they do every day. So you mentioned the word hope. Hope isn't about promising promotions. It's about helping people really see how they can grow within the role that they're in and how they can add value within the organization, but not necessarily through promotions. It's basically looking at it and saying, well, growth is not equal to promotion. It's looking and taking a much broader view than just a promotion.
I like that. Growth does not equal promotion.
Yeah,
I always, sorry, go ahead, Keishla.
I was going to say, I like what you're saying, Patrick. I think it's about clarity and transparency. And most of the time, the reason that I think a lot of leaders struggle with these types of conversations is that they haven't spent the time thinking about why their org is structured the way that it is. How are you creating, what is your alignment for your FTE roles? What's the scope of work that's assigned to it? And how do you build in-seat promotional opportunities that are aligned to the performance and expectations you want people to meet, so that you can still have in-seat promotion opportunities and growth at the same time, but it still could have its constraints by the business needs. And so a lot of times we don't do a good job of explaining to our team members our business model and our structure and why we are built the way that we are and what it takes to get to growth. I had a team member ask me once, hey, is there ever an opportunity that we're going to have another leadership role on the team? And I was like, well, let's talk about it. This segment of the business carries X millions of dollars to be able to support this. So for us to get to that, we would have to grow the business by X millions of dollars to be able to create another role like that. And so it wasn't that I wasn't saying you're not good enough, or you don't have this or that. It's just really understanding the structures financially that we're built on.
Well, you're doing the math for them. And and I love that. I love that strategy. You're pulling them in to better understand, here's how the business runs. Mm-hmm. Right. And somebody who wants to move into a leadership role needs to understand. So you're giving them a taste. This is how the business runs.
That is. Absolutely.
Yeah. I've actually had people that wanted to get a promotion and I convinced them not to because it wouldn't be good for them. I'm like, well, let me explain to you what that looks like. Right. All right. Right. Yeah. So I understand you want a promotion. Maybe we should figure, you want to make more money? Okay, let's figure out a different way of getting to that point, because honestly, leadership is, you may not, you're going to enjoy it. Right.
And it's not always more money. Leadership is not always just money.
No, exactly. Actually,
there are some individual contributors who are doing better.
Exactly, and I want them to. I always looked at my team members that exceeded their numbers and did better than I did. Okay, I'm doing something right.
Yep.
Eric, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the nature of what customer success is and how they're built, right? Customer success, they're growth minded by nature. Right. And so they thrive on learning, problem solving, and seeing progress. If you eliminate that culture from your organization, you most definitely lose your team. Right. And so I think one of the things we're talking about is if there is an opportunity from your leader, if you're making X amount of dollars, if there's a budget, my thought is if I'm a top performer, I'm going to create my own opportunity. Right. I'm going to identify where there's a gap. And I'm going to create an opportunity to be like, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z. And then, when it's time, when that money is available for that promotion, I'm already a shoe in because I've already done it. I've already created opportunity. I already created the awareness of where we can achieve success as an organization. So it's not always going to be black and white. It's not always your leader's going to know the answer. So you create something that works best for organization and for you as well. So I don't wait on your leader to determine your career plan and your career growth. You are your own leader. You are your CEO you are the CEO of your business, right? Of yourself. So you create opportunities. Don't let anyone create that for you.
And I want to take that even a step further, especially for people in customer success whose focus is on helping customers get value and building success plans and executing on those. Let's look at the parallel of my career path, right? I can build a success plan for my career, right? These are people who are thinking that way as part of their job. So, I would think that the percentage of people who bail are even higher for folks in this type of role because this is what they're dealing with. They're dealing with this process on a daily basis. Does that make sense? You all on the same page with me on that one? Yeah.
I'll also add it's also a little changing the mindset inside your team or even in the organization is that it's not a career ladder. And that's where people get really hung up on the promotion.
Yeah.
Track is to think of it as a career lattice. And that a lot of times, like a vine.
Ooh, career lattice, not ladder. Ooh, I like
Yeah.
that.
And so you're going to grow, but sometimes you go out. You're going to go out to kind of eventually go up. And so, because you need that foundation, you need those roots. And so that's where you as a manager or leader, whatever, look for opportunities to put people in a situation where, or a role where they can be mentoring. And so, or they're helping others, or they're doing special projects, or often people call it, creating heroes in every role. And so, where can they take their strengths, their talents, and leverage those and expand their career? And so, if they're great at, let's say, collaboration, okay, can they team really well with sales and really show their collaboration strengths and everything like that? So they're not just trying to go up the ladder; they're spreading out inside the organization and leveraging those skills.
Well, and that's a great segue into my next question. When you're assessing individual strengths and aligning them with growth opportunities, do you have a process or a framework that helps you get beyond generic development conversations and create paths that are actually viable given your organization's realities?
I'll jump on that. I'm really
Yeah.
fortunate to work in an org that has a really strong L&D culture. So I really encourage leaders you don't have to do this in a vacuum. You should be leaning on your HR teams and your L&D teams, because the more consistency you have across your organization, the better. And I think there's nothing better than to create to that lattice or jungle gym. We use the jungle gym framework, Patrick, is maybe not everybody's going to grow in customer success. Maybe they're spending some time in customer success and they're going to move over to product or marketing or something like that. And they take all of those great sensibilities that they learn. In my org, we have very clear targets that our teams have to hit. Where I lead a commercial team, but we tie our goals to competencies. Every role has identified what are the core competencies. We're all flexing all kinds of competencies in the work that we do, but what are the top 5 or 6 competencies that matter most to that role that you want to help your teams develop? And so when I talk to my team, it's like your goals are what you need to do, your competencies are how you need to do it. And you can create opportunities for your team members to flex up and grow. That competency might look a certain way at a manager level role, but might look how that competency exhibits itself at a leadership role might look different. And so how do you teach your team members to start to see what's good for the customer and what's good for the business and flex up? I also like to I kind of do what I like to call like medical rotations in my teams. And so developing subject matter experts. And so while I want to make sure that I'm leaning on people's talents and skills, I also want to make sure my teams are well-rounded. And so I will have rotations where my team members have an opportunity to sit on a product review board for a period of time. And we'll rotate that out. I won't just let one person who's a product guru do it. Everybody gets an opportunity to rotate through that. And so they're getting to see the 360 view of the business that helps them develop. And it might also help them figure out what's a career path that they want to take from there.
It also breeds a sense of empathy for others in the organization that your team is working with, and your team works with. Out of any other organization, people in customer facing roles work with more roles within the organization than anybody else.
Absolutely.
And that empathy is so important.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I always use, when I go into organizations as a new operational leader, one of the first things that I would do is let's develop, and I would do it very quickly, right? And we'd evolve it over time. But I always came in and said, okay, where's your competency matrix for this? And they'd be looking at me like a deer in headlights. What's a competency matrix, right? So, we would very quickly develop a competency model, matrix, whatever you want to call it. We actually have a customer success competency model. Ashley, can you find the link on our website where people can download it, see it, and drop it into chat, please? So we have a very fleshed out a customer success competency model, but you create this, and then what you do is you create this rubric. It says, okay, here's what good looks like at all these different levels. right? And once again, back to Patrick's point, it doesn't mean that people need to go up to management. It's like, okay, here's where you're at now, and we have this. We have a standard role, and we have a senior role, and we have a principal role, and here's a career path. It isn't an up and down. It's a vertical, or maybe a slight increase. It's a different type of career path. But it doesn't always mean that everybody's got to go into management. But I think a lot of teams are in this boat of not having, not knowing where to start, and not having something like this because they're running a million miles a minute. Especially leaders are running a million miles a minute, trying to keep all the balls up in the air. 70% of customer success teams don't have a formal enablement program, right? So we're often in this position where we're building the plane while flying it. Eric, you got anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely. I agree. I mean, you can have, leaders and individual contributor roles, right? And I think if you look at it from a sports team perspective, I know you talked about the 49ers and the not so Dallas Cowboys. I mean, everyone everyone has a position to play, right? I mean, but there's just, you can have a leader that's not the quarterback. You can have a leader that's not the head coach, right? And so you can have those with sprinkled throughout your team, and that kind of spreads and manifests to other team members, and they can see a path of where they can reach and be leaders themselves, right? And so I think that's very insightful in terms of what type of team do you want to build yourself around, right? And I encourage my team to be leaders even as individual contributors. So.
I love that. You can have leaders without them having to be the coach. When I think of the 49ers, staying on the football analogy, when I think of leaders of the 49ers, I think of guys like George Kittle. I think of Brock Purdy, the quarterback. I think of Fred Warner. Unfortunately, we lost him for the year, but I think of Fred Warner, the captain of the defense. Right? It's not just about the coach.
And I think there's nothing better than when a team member is nothing better in football than when a lineman gets to run the ball. Right? Like that's the best play ever when they get run a pass play to somebody you're not expecting to. So
exactly. Or when they handed the ball off to Deebo Samuel and he played as a running back.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about
Andrew before
go ahead,
move off, because for me, I think when you talk about frameworks is, especially when it comes to career path and what frameworks, I just look at, again, I'm very tied to the Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder to really understand what someone's strengths are. And let me even maybe use the word talents, because talents are who you are. It's how you show up. It's your competency, it's your habits, it's your attitude, it's what really drives you. Some people talk about motivation. So talents are like strengths are who you are, how you show up. A lot of times people look at things like, well, what's needed for the role, and they focus in on skills, or they look at knowledge, which are, there's knowledge, what you know, and then your experiential knowledge. But we're really looking at what are your talents. And when you look at a role that requires promotion, you have to really know what are the talents needed for that role. And so, for example, you mentioned empathy earlier. That's a talent. Someone who is in project management, who is very disciplined around tasks and running that project and getting things done, that's a different talent. Where you get someone like in sales, where they're fantastic at woo or communication, networking a room, that's a talent. And you need to understand for those, and again, I'll go back to your math problem, those 15 people, and you got 2 slots, well, what is needed for those 2 roles? So your math problem becomes much simpler. You've taken it from looking at 15 down to possibly 5 people, because you look at it and say, out of those 15 people that are in my group, that I can only promote 2, and you've already gone through like, hey, they're all really talented people, but I need someone who has strengths around executing. Well, that's not all 15 of them. That may be 5 of them. or maybe 7 of them. But I also need someone who's talented in strategic thinking. And so you look at that and say, well, oh, that's only 2 people on my team. And when I look at that, and I'm referencing the Gallup Clifton Strengths here, which again, we'll send out the links. You can actually look at what those themes are or those talents that Gallup outlines. And you can also look at Marcus Buckingham's, because if you're like, I don't know where to start in assessing my team's strengths and what do each of those, Clifton or Standout you can take for free. There's a pay, like I think it's like $25 for the Gallup Clifton Strengths for you and or your team to take it individually. So you can start understanding what are those strengths that each person has, and then start looking at it, what do I need in that role? And that math problem you talk about becomes quite simple, or I'd say simplified, in that you can start going through a process of elimination and or more exploration to understand what are my team strengths and what do I need in those roles.
So basically, you're suggesting that we use data to make some decisions about our people's career paths.
It's additive because you absolutely have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because if you're not having that conversation with your people, then you're missing out the most important component of it.
And Patrick, you're spot on. I think as you were talking, you might have said talent like 5 times, right? I read this book by Jeffrey Cohen, and it's called "Talent is Overrated." And what he talks about is like athletes like Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan. Tiger Woods isn't talented. He was watching his dad play golf in the backyard when he was in his high chair at 2 years old. So he built up the skill set by watching someone, and then he developed and worked hard at it. And to your point of you have to be able to meet with your team and know your team to understand what their skill set is and what brings out their talent, what their talent looks like, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's not that they walked into their first job was customer success. They worked into the role of customer success. And someone said, hey, either you would be great in a client-facing role or you'd be great at a project management role. And so their talent and their hard work and determination put them into a customer success role. And so to your main point is that you have to know your teammates. You have to know your team. You have to know what skill sets to actually have in order to understand what the best development plan would be for them.
Absolutely. Well put.
Yep.
So let's by the way, my gardener's not too loud. You can't hear him in the distance, can you? Okay, thank God. I just want to mention, by the way, we'll get to questions here in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I see a few more added. So please add your questions under the Q&A, and any question that you see that you're like, oh yeah, I want to answer that question, use that upvote button, and we'll tackle those first. All right, so let's talk about the day-to-day tension. Customers need consistency and your best people on the most strategic accounts, but those same people need new challenges to grow. And they need time, selfishly, I'm going to say this, they need time for enablement as well. So how do you actually navigate that without sacrificing either customer outcomes or employee development?
Yeah, I consider myself a practitioner, and you have to build in the time. I took over a team almost 4 years ago, and one of the first things that we did is we just integrated development in our work. And so I run a rotation of meetings that are focused on commercial acumen, service acumen, and every one of those meetings, we spend half our time on the nuts and bolts, and then we spend half our time on micro learnings. And so it's integrated. We're always like learning and building ourselves up and building up our capacity as it relates to our business cycle. So I try to make sure I align the learnings to, I don't want to go, we just recently did an end day a couple of weeks ago, and we spent some time really reviewing our service plans and thinking about how we run at things. I wouldn't do that in the spring because that's headed into Q4 for me. I know my team's mind's not going to be in that space. So I try to make sure that I do an alignment there. I think about what the business needs and the skills that my team needs to develop. And I build that into the training that I do ongoing. I take time to do non-role based training as well. So we did a training on agility just recently and adaptive problem solving. So you got to bring in that sort of indirect learning that helps them know how to build their skills. I love Strength Finder, Patrick. I think it's great. And it's just as important to know what your strengths are, to know what aren't your strengths, because those can be developed. I'm right-handed, but I use my left hand. I don't use it as well, but I also don't just let it hang on my side as like a stump. So we have to be willing to say to our team members, where do you have growth opportunity as well? How do you lean to your strengths, but know where you got to build some capacity in some other areas to become more well-rounded, to be on that career path growth that you want.
But most of the skills, whether they're physical, mental, they can be taught.
Exactly.
They absolutely can be taught.
No, they can be developed.
Right?
Yes.
You know, when my daughter was younger and she plays competitive soccer now, and she plays for a pretty high level team. Actually, Patrick's been to one of her games, seen her play. When before we realized that she was a soccer talent. I was coaching our local rec team. I taught her how to play using her right foot, but she's a lefty.
Yeah.
Right. And so she actually, and I didn't even think about it because I'm a righty. She's a lefty. We didn't really determine that she was a lefty until she was a few years older. Like, holy shit, she's a lefty. And she now is incredibly dangerous because she has a really good boot from the right or the left, right? She's really dangerous, especially when she's playing forward, right? So these things can be taught. It's the same thing with Eric, your story about Tiger Woods. Right? Yeah. He started processing and watching his dad, and then he went out and it's all about repetition. You want to get good at shooting hoops, go out and shoot 100 hoops every day, right? Yeah. You're going to get better at it. Practice. It's why when somebody says about our training, hey, there's a lot of there's content here that's repetitive. I'm like, yeah, it's designed that way on purpose, right? It's that repetition that causes it to stick in your mind, right? Eric, what do you got to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, the repetition, any trainings that you can take and can fuel your mind, and to have you produce more and more and more. But I think it boils down to what you want out of your own career, right? Don't let anyone else determine your career, right? That's on you. A lot of times I like to say is that, you manage your manager. Don't let your manager manage you, right? You come to your one-on-ones with an agenda of what you want to talk about in terms of, your career growth and what you want to see, right? You take control of, because your strengths better than any leader does, right? You know what you're wanting to do, and you know how to get there. It's just a matter of you having the confidence to do it. So, I love the models, and so that's my input on that.
Yeah, you own your schedule too, right? You make time for career development. We were on a call this morning, a prospect call, and I said, you need to set one of our best practices is you need to establish with your team that they're going to set aside 60 or 90 minutes a week for career development, and in this case, part of that is going to be consuming our enablement content. But you need to carve that time out, right? And they need to carve that time out on a weekly basis, right? And the rule should be, if you've got a conflict, a business conflict, customer conflict, personal conflict, the agreement is that you will not delete that time, you will move it somewhere else. Right? But you want to get people into this habit of career development. Right? And that repetition is the way that you create the habit. Patrick, you got anything to add that hasn't been covered already before we move on to the next question?
No, I would also, I'll just add one little piece. I'm +1 on everything that's been talked about. I would just say also look for, as those skills or those competencies are looking to be built, look for partnering opportunities, encourage partnering opportunities. I'll use myself as an example. I go to a big conference networking, working the room. I ride the coattails of salespeople. That is their talent. That is their strength. Me, I'm much more of a small group. Let's dive into the details. Let's have a problem solving, very much more intimate type setting. That's where I really is my comfort zone. I enjoy that. But so that's why I go to a sales conference. I'm like, look, I'm going to partner with you, sales guy. Let's go around and network the room because that's their strength. So look for areas as they go to work on those weaknesses where they can partner with others to shine.
No, I was the same way. That was my, that was my MO when I was working with sales teams. I'm the services guy. I know how to close business. I know how to go deep, right? But you do your type A personality stuff.
Yeah.
I can handle myself just fine, but you take the lead. And when you and we've been talking about this actually regularly recently, that we need to be looking at the revenue team as a whole, right? The revenue team is marketing, sales, post sales, and product. These four organizations are responsible for revenue in your organization, right? So we shouldn't be looking at the revenue team as sales and then post sales, right? We're there to work together. We each have our role. So and I know we touched on this a little bit before, actually Patrick did. But Keishla, I know you had some thoughts on this. What does an effective career development framework look like when you're being honest about the math? Right? How do you build something meaningful that isn't just retention theater?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm super fortunate to be in an org that proactively thinks about in-seat promotion. So every one of my customer success managers came on board knowing I can get to be a senior customer success manager by doing this level of performance. Super clear, tied to, objective performance and qualitative performance around competencies, and a clarity of understanding of how long they had to do that for, how many revenue cycles that performance had to be in place for them to be considered for promotion. So I love that I walked into a space that was already considering in-seat promotion. And then I think what you want to do is just, like I said at the beginning, is to be really clear about what people want to do. Not everybody on my team wants to be a customer success leader. And so how am I making sure that I'm developing those other skills and competencies across the org, whether they want to lean more operationally? Are they interested in product? And how do I create opportunities to build subject matter expertise that benefits the team, that benefits the business need? Allowing for those side projects and stretch projects that are balanced and equitable. I'm building an AI SME team, that's working on different things, and not everybody wants to do that. And so how do I tap into the people that want to kind of stretch in a particular way and give them those opportunities, but that it's also in a way that's feeding the team, but being transparent about the type of team that I have. And so if they're ready to grow as a commercial leader, then we can talk about those things. And that might not be on my team, right? That might not be in my org either. And that's okay. And so we have to be willing to say, I'm going to make you the best you are here. And that growth might not take place here, but I'm going to get you ready for whatever it is you want to do next.
I always encourage my team, if there was something that I thought was a better fit on another team in my organization, I always encourage them. I said, I will do. It would be a bummer to lose you, right? But I also want to support your career growth. And all I ask is that we figure out some sort of transition so it minimizes the pain for the rest of the team and the customers, right? But that was something I was always talking to my team about. Hey, if you think there's a better opportunity over here, I will support you. I will do whatever you need. I will speak your praises to that leader, right? Because I'd rather have that person stay within the company than go somewhere else, right? That lost domain expertise is detrimental to the company.
Yeah, it's so important organizationally. I don't think this is, and when we talk about CS leaders having a seat at the table, this is a great opportunity for customer success leaders to be influential across product, across marketing, across sales, where we have an opportunity to add value to the organization because we are building customer-centered customer voice employees that can go off and be in other parts of the business. It only strengthens the business.
Oh God, yeah. I loved it when I had people that said, "Hey, I want to get a product." Yeah, because I know that you're gonna share the message with product of what we're missing that makes our jobs difficult. So, yeah, what can I do to push you in there? Right? Eric, you got anything to add?
No, I was just writing that down in terms of getting into the product because I know, some of the CSMs on my team, they want more product access. But
Yeah.
I can most definitely see the benefit. I know, Keith, I was listening to you, and one of the things that I was thinking about was, I kind of take the non-conventional way of, just throwing some of my team members into the deep end and see if they can swim, right? Focusing on, I know what their weaknesses are, right? And they know what their weaknesses are, and they steer away from their weaknesses. I throw them into the deep end to work on the weaknesses versus the strength. I already know where you're strong at. I want to see you expand and grow. So I'm going to challenge you and put you in and expose you to other avenues so that you can grow. Because I don't want you to continuously grow towards your strength. Let's focus on your weaknesses. So that's one of the things that I do with my team, because it helps them to balance out and get over fears. And then once they start to get over those fears, they tend to grow. Their confidence tends to blossom. And then throughout the organization, leaders see that, right? And so when leaders see that, then you want your name to be called out during meetings where you're not attending, right? It's about you showing your worth and you showing your value throughout the organization without speaking.
Now, all that being said, though, okay, I think this is where we need to get creative, because customer success actually has incredible career flexibility. People can move into operations, they can move into technical CSM roles, they can move into customer education, onboarding, customer marketing, all without needing a traditional promotion or to leave the organization. So are you actively surfacing these as legitimate growth paths, or do they feel like consolation prizes?
That's a great question, because I don't necessarily know like what other departments have on their roadmap in terms of openings where I can see a particular team member sliding into one of those openings. When they're playing during their annual planning, they might say, "Hey, we're thinking about adding headcount for this role because we need support on these products in this area and that area." And I think that's where CSMs need to exert themselves during meetings, because that leader may think, "Hey, I heard her talk, I heard him talk, and he did a pretty good job on this project. I can see that person in this role that I'm creating in 2027 or 2026." Right. So I think that's a valid question. So I'm not sure if I answered it correctly, but I gave it a shot.
Well, there's no correct answer. I think it's more of a rhetorical. I think if anything, it's a rhetorical question for everybody. Yeah. Right.
I think it's important for leaders to, you have to stay in touch with what's happening across the org, and how do you make sure that you create a culture. I mean, I'm always looking for jobs. You should always be paying attention to what's out there. Number one, part of getting, like knowing what's next for you is a little bit of opportunity. You got to have a little luck and opportunity coming together at a right time. And so I encourage my team, like, you should be checking our internal job board and seeing what's going on. Our org also promotes the idea of they're called internships. And so on a cycle, teams will put out a call and say, "Hey, like, we maybe have a special project that we want to do. If somebody wants to come and intern in another part of the firm, they have an opportunity to just see maybe I don't know what it's like to work over on this side of the business, and I don't want to go and take a job I don't know if I want, but I want to explore a little." And so I think it's really important for orgs that where you have that capacity and people are performing the way that they should, they can do a little bit of something side of desk for 6 weeks to get a taste of what operations is doing or what marketing is doing. That those are great ways to stretch. And I think it's just about getting creative, but also being thoughtful that you can do that and maintain the business. And sometimes in smaller orgs, it's tight, right? Because everybody's already wearing a lot of different hats, and so it can be a stretch.
I think it comes back to a couple things of making sure that your one-on-ones are very effective, that you're communicating with each other very candidly, and what that is, so it doesn't feel, and I'll use your word here, Andrew, that it doesn't feel like a consolation prize. That you can clearly articulate the value of how this particular task or this particular body of work is adding to the value of their career, their interest, developing on and building upon their strengths, and or setting them up for future success. So that's on you to have that very candid conversation, which then leads me to making sure that your one-on-ones are not status reports. All too often, I see what happens is we talk about this career thing, and I go into organizations and I sit and I go, look, I'm going to shadow you on your weekly one-on-ones, or hopefully they're weekly or every other week, or at least I hope you're doing them. So when they do, I sit there and I listen, and I'm like, all they're talking is talking about projects and what's going on in their projects. And I go, let's talk about how a one-on-one's supposed to be structured, because it's about the individual. Or I see the manager spending 90% of the time talking. And I'm like, this isn't a one-on-one. This is all about your projects and your business. That's a whole separate.
Which is something that should be shared in an email, right? We want to talk to people, right?
Right.
So what role should individual contributors play in driving their own development versus what the company provides, right? How do you foster, and you touched on, I think, Keishla, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but how do you foster ownership without it becoming an addiction of leadership responsibility?
Yeah, 100%. It's your career. It's your job to own that development. I think it's, 70-30, 75-25 split. It's my job as a leader to help you understand, the business structure and what opportunities are there, and to create an opportunity for you to grow in skill and capacity and those types of things. But what you want to do, I don't know that. Right? I don't know what it is that you want to be when you grow up.
You're there to facilitate that.
I'm here to
right?
facilitate it and
Right,
guide
yeah.
it. But I could think, and I could see talent in you and think. I've had people who are like, oh, for sure, that's my next leader, my next manager, and they have no desire whatsoever to do that.
Right.
Right. And so they have to be able to articulate what matters to them, how they want to grow. And then it's for us to then create, where within the business construct can I help you flex that skill, develop that muscle, and improve that thinking. And so I think it's so important for the ownership is definitely on the team member. And it's for me to create space. I do skip level meetings with some of my team members on a regular cadence, and that is their meeting. They own it. I don't set the agenda. I'm like, what are you here to talk about? And I would have some of them come in and they're talking to me about the business. I'm like, first of all, that's your manager's job to do that. I don't want to talk about that. How do you want to use your time with me? And engage. And we do not have to talk about this account or that account or this project or that project. And so I think to that point, Patrick, right? Like there's a time and a space for that, but you should dedicate carved out time that is very clear that we are focused on skill development and focusing on what is important to you in developing in your career.
Eric, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah.
Similar, different? Do you have a different division? Is it 70-30, the individual? What's your take?
I would say, yeah, part 70-30. Here at FinThrive, we do have a good training program, of course. But I think it really boils down to the individual, because leaders, I'm not sure if CSMs realize this, we have so much on our plates. And then we really and authentically want to be engaged through our one-on-ones. But I'm going to be honest, sometimes we probably disengage a little bit because we are trying to carry the business and, trying to put out fires for you all, and keep things away from the team. And we kind of take on that burden. And then when you guys come and have meetings, it's not always going to be a great day, right? And so that's something you all have to realize from a CSM perspective is we want you guys to be the best that you can be, but sometimes those meetings can be a drain for us, just to be honest. But then we do want to get the most out of it, right? And so that's where it comes to you bring in the agenda items and you come in so that we are engaging as a partner with you in your career development. And so it's not just a dialogue where I'm advising you and telling you what to do and I'm being a professor and talking at you, right? It's a conversation of,
Right.
what works and
It's
what
a collaboration.
doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
So
Patrick, before we're going to move to questions for audience questions next. But Patrick, before we move on, putting on your consultant cap, having that, given that you consult on this very thing on a regular basis with leaders and teams, how do Keishla's and Eric's approaches resonate with you?
I think it's great what they've been saying. I think that around the strengths and about meeting with the individual and being curious as managers and leaders, I think that I just, for me, that gives me, I'll just, for lack of a better word, warm fuzzies. Because when I hear that people are like, hey, I want to spend time, I want to get to know you. I mean, when you look at the data, when you look at at the end of the day, what people want to say in the workplace, and Gallup has done a ton of studies around this. It comes down to two things: that an employee can say, I'm able to use my strengths every day at work, and I know what is expected of me. Those are the two things that the studies, Gallup has written numerous studies about that. It goes back to also what they call their Gallup Q12, which has to do with employee engagement. And I go, for everything that we've talked about here, those are the building blocks so that employees can say that, hey, here, what are your strengths? Let me figure out how we can deploy those. And then that leads into them knowing what is expected of them. I'm expecting you to use your strengths. I'm setting up a role. I'm having a career development plan that we're going to execute on. And oh, by the way, those are going to be tied eventually, to OKRs or objectives and key results for the organization. But it's all going to come together simply by a manager being engaged and being curious.
Exactly.
Or to put it another way, something we say in management essentials is what do employees really want is to know me, to engage me, and to empower me. And that's also rooted in science as well and data. And you kind of go and surveys, but if you know them, you engage with them, and you empower them. And that's what we've been talking about today. So I'm very excited to hear and share what we've done and talked about today.
I'll tell you, that word empower is so critical. Oftentimes, our teams are not performing to the capacity that they can be because we're holding on to the power as leaders. And if we could let that go, like I've given my team frameworks for how to operate and they understand it's not, I made a better decision than you. Here's the business basis for why I'm doing that, why I think the way I think, why we're doing this the way we need to do it. And if we teach our teams to understand how to not just do what's nice for the customer or what they're asking for, they're demanding this product feature update. Is there an ROI on that? Is there, teaching them to understand that and empowering them with that knowledge? That's how people grow, because then they're able to lift above their task and their projects and their deadlines and see the bigger picture. and it helps them to start to think strategically for you. And so empowerment is so key. I love that word.
I want to first off give you a high five here, picking up on the empower and build off of what you just said, because all of a sudden you probably saw me perk up and get all excited here. And that is on the empowerment. One of the questions that we get the most in Manager Essentials course is about how do I motivate my employees? Well, let me turn it into drive. And a great example and a great book on this is Daniel Pink's book, Drive. When you talk about empowerment, what do people want? Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And what are you doing as a manager, as a leader, to create an environment that you can empower people and create that drive in those people? So, Keishla, you're spot on.
100%.
Awesome. Let's get to some questions. By the way, just a reminder, folks, if you've been with us before, we do go until 1:15 So we're going to get through looks like it's only 5 questions. So we'll get through as many of these as possible between now and about 14 minutes past noon Pacific. So our first question comes from Clay. Clay, good to see you. Although it looks like you had to drop off, but I'm sure you will watch this in the recording on the platform. Clay asks, I would love to hear how you have structured your teams to give ICs a career, like junior, senior staff, etc. I have plenty to say on this. I touched on it earlier, but Patrick, looked like you want to jump in on this. By the way, for my other Eric, Keishla, if you want to check out the Q&A, if there's any questions that jump out at you that you want to jump into, hit that answer live button. But Patrick, what have you got for Clay?
Yeah, I think I wanted to know a little bit more because there's a lot of directions you can kind of take this question, but I look at it just the structure of the organization and what we can do as an organization to support our customers. And like, okay, sure, do we want to have a really flat organization? Do we need to have a little bit more structure into it? And that's why I kind of wanted a little bit more, but I kind of like the flatter organization type of model. But I go, okay, so in each of those roles, what do we need from a junior staff person to a senior staff person to eventually a manager? What are those skills? What are those, again, we talked about competencies that are needed of each of those roles and somewhat having maybe a development expectation framework for each, but we're very, very clear as to how we're going to structure those, but also why.
Yep.
Why do we need this role? And you've got to continually ask yourself that. So it's like if I'm creating another layer, just to give someone a sense, a feeling of promotion or somewhat status in the organization, well, that doesn't really serve the organization. That serves the individual, not the organization, and more importantly, not the client. And so you've got to sit there and look at every single role and say, look, can I then, instead of having another layer, can I create a hero in this role and say, look, you're a specialist. You're a specialist in, let's say, this particular industry or this particular size of client. And therefore, instead of creating all of these layers, go, I've got a layer here and I'm creating specialists within that.
Well, I think I think there's a need for specialization, but I also think that there's a need for it's like the level of the expertise level, right? Somebody who's a so when I was at Burst Cloud Business Intelligence, we had junior folks that, their job was to design a data model, an initial data model. But my senior folks were the peer review of the data model, and these are people that had X number of years more experience with data modeling, and right. Mm-hmm. And then there was a different group there was a different level that was responsible for going beyond the data model and building the ETL scripts, right, which need to be freaking dialed in order to pull data from various systems and populate the data model. And so we would create a competency model, we'd develop a skills matrix, and we would create a rubric that would say, here's what good looks like at each one of these levels. Because you can't just create a career path and say, here's your career path. You got to define it. You got to be really specific about and here's how you move from one level to another. right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
that's really important too. You got to give people a clear understanding of what good looks like.
Yeah, when I said developing expectation framework, that's what I meant. So well said.
Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
Andrew.
Keishla, Eric, anything to add to that to Clay's question?
Patrick handled it.
Awesome. All right, Pat. I'm sorry, Eric. Do you had something to add?
No, I like what you said, the clear direction, clear path, right? I think everyone works better when things are clearer. But yeah, no, not. But other than that, Patrick hit it right on the head, nail on the head. So
Patrick, if you can hit the done button on that
Oh,
question.
I
Clay,
sure
thanks for the
can.
question. I'm sure you, like I said, sure you'll watch this later, or I'll get an email from you. Clay's a customer of ours. Our next question comes from Ola. Ola, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us again. Ola asks, how can CS leaders effectively encourage and support upskilling within their teams, especially in areas like business acumen or strategic thinking? How can we motivate and create opportunities?
I think from a CS leader, you demonstrate what that looks like first off, right? And then you expose your team to different meetings that they can attend to see you know what those meetings look like, to give them an idea, reference, of course, material. But I think I'm all for exposing the team to different avenues, whether it's executive leadership meetings, project meetings, or just exposures is key, to encouraging your team to kind of see and be exposed to different avenues to grow.
Yeah, I agree with those,
Keisha, what do you got?
Eric.
Yeah.
And I think it's equally important to just teach your teams how to talk about their business in strategic and thoughtful ways. If every time you talk to your team member in their one-on-ones or whatever, you're sort of in the task, in the nuts and bolts, and you're not looking, tell me about the trends you're hearing, what's your analysis of your risk? What's your risk assessment? Like, you have to teach them how to think about their business. They're all running little small businesses. So teach them business acumen in their world, and then you create the foundation to be able to scale that up.
I think you need to. I'm going to take this a step further. I think you've both been kind of dancing around the net of this. You need to teach them. You need to explain to them the what and the why.
Yeah.
Right. It's the what and the why. Right.
Yeah.
The what is the business acumen or the strategic thinking. The why is I'm going to connect the dots for you, and you got to do the math for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You need to understand business acumen because this is going to have this impact on your career, on your business, on your customers, on our business.
Yeah. And what I want my team, my measure as a leader is I'm not getting contracts signed. That's not my job, right? My measure as a leader is how well I create the conditions for my team to execute towards their goals. And that is giving them good pricing strategies or good product alignment and things to go and help them run at retaining the customers. But they can be doing those same things at their level. How do you know? Is it, you can't come and tell me like, oh, this person loves me and that's why they send their contract. No. What are the conditions that you created in your business that led to that success? Because ultimately, the work of customer success is to find the path of least resistance, the lowest common denominator that gets our partners to the success, not overdoing it, not doing team too much, right? I say this all the time. Like, usually we check ourselves, we find ourselves doing too much and get too little on return, and we over index on things or under index on things, whether they work or not. But I need you to tell me that, hey, I had 5 ROI conversations, and those 5 ROI conversations had this impact. I need to know that, what are the strategies that you're deploying? Because we either got to stop it, start it, continue it. Like, what are we doing? And I need that information to know what's working, what's not, so we can reset our strategy. And we have to teach our teams to not over validate things or under validate things and really understand what's happening in their business.
Patrick, what do you got to add to this? Given that you have that course where we talk about this.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, talk quite a bit about this. I was gonna focus in on the second. There's two questions there, and I was gonna focus on the second part around motivate and create opportunities. How do we motivate and create opportunities? We already talked about a little bit about motivation, and again, numerous people say like motivation, it's fickle. I mean, think, for example, working out. Some days you feel like it, some days you don't. And so it's like it's fickle. What it is what drives people. And again, I'll reference back to Daniel Pink's book called Drive. I'll even drop in the thing. There's a video out there. You can Google it. I'll even drop it in the chat here to go out and take a look at it about how, and then which leads to the second part of how do I create those opportunities. Think of it like a coach on a professional basketball. I think of Steve Kerr. He's got tons of, got a stacked roster of talent on the team, but they work on their individual contributors that come together. They work individually on their talents. They work at becoming a better player. But Steve Kerr and the coaching team creates an environment where they can be driven. They're all going towards a vision. So that's you as a manager. So I think kind of get sometimes out of the hat or wearing the hat of being a manager and go, I got to put on the hat of being a coach and understand what a coach does, read about it and understand it. And that will kind of help you get to that level and taking your team to creating that driven type of environment.
Awesome. Ola, thank you. Let's see. All right, I think we got time for one or two more questions. First question, our next question comes from Virginia. Virginia, thanks for joining us and thanks for the question. I love upskilling my team and I try to work on skills that are not job specific. Learning styles, time management, communication skills. I'm having trouble getting my leadership to see this as valuable because it's not a CS skill. I'm sorry, time management, communication are all CS skills, by the way. How do you illustrate value to leadership so that you can tell your team to respect that time in their calendar the same way they would any other meeting?
That was a lot. That was a lot in that question.
Yeah.
I think value time in a meeting. I'm trying to understand which it's the Virginia upskill.
So time management. I look at things like time management, communication, empathy, active listening, storytelling. May not, like, for example, immediately think you might not think customer success, but it's 100% customer success. And we have been especially since we released our value-based selling program a few months ago, we've been talking to a lot of customers and prospects about the impact that a trained customer success team can have on your book of business. Okay, a trained customer success team, whether it's value-based selling or our CS Foundations, we have data from our existing customers that say they attribute anywhere from a 3 to 5% increase in retention and or expansion to trained people. Okay, if you've got a $100 million book, if you got a $10 million book of business, do the math. What's 3 more percent? And forget 3%. What's 1%? Right, 1%. Well, if you can't commit to a 1% improvement in retention or expansion, you're basically saying the people who I have on my team are unable to be enabled. They are unable to grow. Okay, so put it in, do the math for them. I mean, if that's how you convince your leadership, when you do the math, because it's going to be really hard. Even 3 to 5% improvement is hard to argue, but 1%, super hard to argue. If I have a $100 million book of business and I can guarantee you a 1% improvement, 1%, it's $1 million.
Yeah. I think too, it's, if you're working on communication skills, have we reduced customer complaints? If you're working on time management, have we been able to speed time to onboarding or different things? I think there's some ways to quantify these things for leadership. I think for your team members, it's really about connecting it to the work. I think if you do training sort of standing alone, it feels nice to have instead of need to have. It's like, how do you make sure whatever competency-based training you're doing, you want to make sure you're feeding it back to the work. But all of that you said, Andrew.
And Virginia, if you connect with me if we're not already connected on LinkedIn, and message me, I actually have some statistics from everything from Bessemer to Harvard Business Review and a couple other places that talk about, hey, an educated, enabled team translates into more revenue for the organization.
Yeah.
So, and you can point, instead of you saying that to them directly, you can say, hey, look at what these articles from well-respected sources say.
Like that.
Awesome. Okay, last question from Danielle. And I'd like to get a response from all three of you. Can you touch on career development for team leads and managers? What's the development plan look for them? And Patrick, I want you to go last because I want you to talk about management essentials. So I think that's because that's exactly what that is. But I mean, Eric, Keishla, how do you handle career development for leaders?
I know for me, my team leads and I have them kind of step into my role and I take a step back. I have them do some of the leadership responsibilities to give them a taste to what that looks like. Attending meetings, leading team calls, managing projects, and driving the results of that. But then at the same time, showcasing to the whole org what their performance is and have them get accolades for that, and make sure I call that out. So I
love that. Do my job. Do my job. See what it's like.
Yep.
Yeah. What about you, Keishla?
I think really being clear on the domains within your business and making sure that you've got clear swim lanes, areas of responsibility, where they have an opportunity to be a leading voice in those particular areas. So I mentioned that I do those rotations. My team, we divide spending time on commercial versus service support work, and then letting them shadow you, being transparent. If I have to go to Rev Review and talk to my senior leadership, I come back and I have that same conversation with my team. I'm being really transparent and letting them know what the challenges are and letting them be a part of setting our strategy and our plans for the work that we do in our business.
Okay, and wrapping things up, Patrick, before we close the webinar, what do you got?
I'll just repeat the question. How often are managers checking in on performance development plans with CSMs? Once a quarter, once a month? Management essentials.
No. Can you touch on career development team? Can you touch on career development for team leads and managers? What's the development plan look for them?
Yeah. I think the development plan is one of the things we do in Manager Essentials is provide all the templates and structure on the career development plan. Like, what is the structure? How do you go about segmenting the work, having a plan, building it into your one-on-ones? What goes into your performance review beyond what your company is using in the performance review process? So developing that structure so that it's just part of the natural flow of your daily or your weekly one-on-ones or bi-weekly one-on-ones, so that it's just at the end, it's not a surprise. So it's all built into the framework.
Awesome. Okay, folks, we've reached the end of today's session. I want to thank our guests for sharing their valuable insights and experiences. Your contributions make these discussions truly meaningful for our community. To our audience, thank you for the active participation. Please share your thoughts about today's session on LinkedIn by tagging me, our guests, Success Hacker, or Success Coaching. We love to hear your takeaways. Mark your calendars for our next CS Leadership Roundtable on December 12th, when we'll discuss delivering personalized customer experience at scale. And I believe we'll be at a point where we can announce kind of our new structure for our webinars, I believe in December. I would hope so, Ashley, right? We're going to be ready to launch the new program.
So, yes.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll share all that also. So on December 12th. So make sure to join us on December 12th to check it out. Finally, let me leave you with this. Great CS leaders know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them. And that's why we created this series. Have a great rest of your day and month, and we'll see you in December.